Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. This show is designed to highlight the work of leaders here in the United States and then beyond. Today with us, Jordan Lippner. And Jordan is an attorney who happens to be the chairman of the board of the Southampton Animal Shelter. Let's all welcome Jordan. And Jordan, it's so nice to have you on Successful Philanthropy. And I'd like to start first with a little bit about you. You're an attorney, and I'm assuming you work long hours. And how did you get involved in Southampton Animal Shelter?
Sure. Thank you, Jean. It's wonderful to be here. I've always been a huge dog person my whole life. I grew up with dogs. Unbeknownst to me, what I was doing at the time when I was about 8 years old, I got my parents to rescue a beagle that had wandered into our yard. They notified the local authorities. No one came to claim him. And my parents looked at me and said, okay, yes, we can keep him. So it wasn't until many years later that I appreciate looking back on it, that was my first rescue. And then as an adult, though, I was living in Manhattan, and I realized there was something missing in my life. And it wasn't just that I was not married at the time. It was my love of animals. And I said to myself, there's something really wrong with me if I can't find the time, despite my busy schedule, to care for an animal. And I rescued my first dog. It was a fantastic, life-changing experience. I say life-changing because I really felt that being responsible for an animal opened me up to all kinds of possibilities in my life. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I met the woman who would become my wife. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think animals add so much to our lives and really emotionally unlock me on a level that I had not been. And so I love telling that story because I really believe that it's true. So that is what got me really involved in the rescue world. My wife and I bought a house out in Watermill out in the Hamptons. And one of the things that we started to do is we started to go to the Southampton Animal Shelter to walk dogs as volunteers. And it was there that we met our dog, Jax, who's a border collie. And we fell in love with him and adopted him. And we've had him now for the last 7 years, and it's just fantastic. He's one of the 3 rescues that we have.
And I love that you have 3. In my home, we have 2 rescues, and I can't say enough about what they add to our lives. My husband and I are in love with our 2 dogs, and I think they love us back. Of course, we take very good care of them. But getting back to Southampton Animal Shelter, how did you decide to get involved? You and I are both involved with this wonderful shelter. I'm an honorary board member. I've chaired the Southampton Animal Shelter Gala many, many times, and hopefully we'll do it again this year. But how did you get involved?
Sure. So, the Hamptons can be a very small community. I think the rescue community can be a very small and tight-knit community. And my wife, who herself was very involved in animal rescue, had met a couple of the board members, and we became socially very friendly with them. And they asked me, would I be interested in joining? And it was one of the easiest decisions I ever had. I said, sure, where do I sign up? And this happened to be during the pandemic, when we had taken that opportunity, a very silver lining and a very bleak time, to move out of the city full time and live out in the Hamptons for good. And so the timing was just perfect. I had the time to dedicate and to donate, and went through the process that we have at the board. They brought me on unanimously, and that's how I ended up joining. And it was actually during my first year as a member of the board that the chairman of the board at the time stepped down. And I threw my hat in the ring, and my colleagues elected me to be chairman and to lead us into the rest of the decade here.
Well, I want to thank you for your involvement and for being the chair of Southampton Animal Shelter's board. I think we're fortunate to have you, and we're happy that you're enjoying it. Now, Jordan, tell our audience a little bit about Southampton Animal Shelter.
Sure. So one of the things that makes Southampton different than most animal shelters folks might be familiar with is that we are what's known as an open admission shelter. While some shelters pick and choose which animals they might try to save because of their belief on adoptability or what have you, we will take any animals. And that's not just limited to dogs and cats. We take bunny rabbits, we take guinea pigs. We've even had birds, parakeets in our shelter. And it's a very open environment where anyone in the community can come in. We service the community as well. We provide a very low cost veterinary service program to the community. We also do a spay neuter program in the community. And part of what I've tried to do as chairman is expand our involvement in the local community. It's very important for a shelter not just to do outreach and seek to get quote unquote bigwigs to make donations, but to have the local community invested in our success. And that's one of the things that we've been focused on in 2023 and will continue to do so going forward.
And that's truly wonderful and important because ultimately most of the people adopting from a shelter are the local people. And I think that the Hamptons community of people that live there year-round are really an extraordinary group. And it's wonderful that you're getting them more and more involved with the shelter. And on my visits to the shelter, it's been wonderful to see so many people there adopting and then also volunteering their time and of course their knowledge. And for those watching, you can become a philanthropist by not only writing checks, but if you give your time and knowledge, you're also a philanthropist. Back to you, Jordan. Jordan, the shelter was founded about 14 years ago. Susan Allen and a group of local people, including Jonathan McCann and others, formed a group to create the shelter. What makes this different from most other shelters? Are we a kill shelter or no-kill shelter?
Great question, Jean. Thank you for bringing that up. We are a no-kill shelter. We do not put animals down. One of the things that differentiates us is we actually have a training staff on site. So to the extent that we rescue an animal that has behavioral problems, which I will say most of our animals do not, we work with that cat or dog to get them to a place where they can be homed and have a successful adoption and a successful life with the folks that adopt them. It's very important to us to not just bring in an animal and feed it, but to provide it with the tools to be successful out in the real world. And so that's one of the things that we're very proud of. We have specialists that work with the animals, and we have people that we train. We're very big on training. We don't just bring someone in to, for example, be a dog walker. We make sure they go through a training process so that it's safe for the animal, safe for them, and it can be a successful relationship. And as part of the dog walking process, an animal that might have been homeless learns how to interact with human beings, and it makes for a very successful placement rate. One of the problems that plagues a lot of shelters is animals get returned or they get abandoned. We have very high rate of animals permanently staying when they get adopted, and we're very proud of that.
And why is that? Why do you think people keep the animals they adopt from Southampton Animal Shelter? Is it because they're well trained? And is it also because you do a good screening before you allow someone to adopt? I would imagine it's both. The animals are well trained, and then you do a good screening process.
It's definitely both. And, I will let the shelters that are guilty remain nameless, but there definitely are organizations out there that you can just walk in, basically sign a piece of paper and take whatever animal you want and walk out the door. We don't do that because we don't think that that's a good way to make a successful adoption. We want these adoptions to be lifelong adoptions. We want animals to find their forever homes and not to be issues once they leave our premises. And so we are very focused on not just training the animals, but doing a screening. I don't want folks to get the wrong idea and think that you have to go through some crazy lengthy process that only 10% of the population could ever pass. That's not the case at all. But we do try to put in some effort to match up folks well with the animal they're interested in.
And another question, and I've been asked this many times, and I also put this on my Instagram, but I want to hear from you. What advice would you give to someone who wants to adopt? What will they have to do once they adopt? I mean, first, I know they have to provide a loving home and good food, but what else?
Well, really good question, because I think there's a percentage of folks out there who actually don't think this through. And if you do think it through, that goes a long way towards making a successful adoption. So the first thing I would say is that people should realize that an animal is an actual commitment. It's like having a child. They need to be cared for. They need to be loved. They're going to give you all that love back. They're probably going to love you more than you actually love the animal. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about being a parent of a pet, is they're incredibly loving. But appreciate that they'll need health care. Animals are not cost-free. So just please do it with your eyes wide open that you do need to take your dog or cat to the vet once a year for a checkup. If you notice that they're not acting well, just as you would with a child, take them to the vet because perhaps they're sick and they could use some medicine. They need to be fed a couple times a day. If it's a dog, they need to be walked. These are the kinds of, it's not rocket science, but I do think that these are things that people don't necessarily think about. And so, this is a weird time of year for the shelter world, because typically you see animals, a fair number of them get adopted as Christmas presents. Unfortunately, though, because folks don't necessarily think all these issues through, you also see a lot of animals get returned after Christmas. So we at the Southampton Animal Shelter, we really try to talk to people about what it is involved in adopting an animal, just so that we can try to minimize those issues.
Yes, and I never think it's a good idea for someone to surprise a relative with a dog, unless it's like a child and your child wants a dog. But I think it's best for the whole family to go and meet the dog. I know when we adopted one dog that came up from the Caribbean, and it wasn't through a Southampton Animal Shelter, we were asked, everyone in the family had to meet the dog. And that was, I think, a very good idea. And we fell in love with this dog, and Rosita is part of our family, and we love her very much. And it's been a great blessing to us. For our audience, we are with Jordan Lippner. He is the chairman of the board of the Southampton Animal Shelter. And Jordan, we're hearing about this dog respiratory illness a lot in the news. I hear it's only in a few states, maybe 15 states, and I've read nothing about it being in New York. But what advice can you give to people who maybe have a concern about this? How can they guard their dogs from getting this? I'm reading certain things. I'd love to hear from you.
Well, it's a great question, because people always get very concerned when you hear about, a scary new illness traveling around, especially in this post-COVID world that we live in. We've been fortunate. We have not had that issue at the Southampton Animal Shelter. But one of the things that, folks can do is, be mindful if you are going to place your animal, for example, in a kennel because you're going on vacation. That is a great chance for your pet to get exposed to potential illnesses that exist out there. So I'd recommend, when you pick up your animal, bring it to the vet, get it checked out. One of the things that's great about us at the Southampton Animal Shelter is because we have veterinarians on staff, our animals are constantly getting checked to the extent there are any issues. So, we rescue animals locally as well as from around the country. And when we bring them in, we have a process. They go into quarantine. And while they're in quarantine, they're checked out by the vet. We do a full blood workout. And when everything checks out, we take them out of quarantine. So we're very concerned and focused on making sure that when you come in to adopt an animal at the Southampton Animal Shelter, you will be adopting a healthy animal.
Yes, and actually, one of my daughters adopted a fantastic dog from the Southampton Animal Shelter, and this dog could not be more loving, kinder, or you couldn't find a better pet. So firsthand, I know how great the shelter is. Now, many people watching this might want to get involved. They might want to volunteer their time. They also may want to donate. What is the website for donations?
Sure. So we welcome all types of donations, be it financial or your time. And first of all, the website, southamptonanimalshelter.com. southamptonanimalshelter.com. Very simple. And we actually just recently redid the website, so I invite everybody to please come check it out. All kinds of information. We list with photos all of our adoptable pets on the shelter, and invite you certainly to come down to the shelter to meet any animal you may be interested in. As far as getting involved with the shelter, I can encourage you to contact us. The folks at the front desk are incredibly friendly and incredibly helpful. All you have to do is say what you're interested in, and your call will be directed. We do have a manager at the shelter who is in charge of all our volunteers. We are always looking for new volunteers, whether it's for a short period of time or to be a permanent on-call volunteer for us. Whatever suits your schedule, we'd welcome it. I invite you. Volunteers are the lifeblood of the Southampton Animal Shelter, so please do consider volunteering.
And I love that the Southampton Animal Shelter is very interested in recruiting volunteers. And for all of you watching, volunteering may fill a gap in your life. You might have a full-time job, you might have a family, but what you might be missing is that tiny bit of outside work, volunteering. And if you love animals, well, Southampton Animal Shelter is the place to volunteer. Now, another thing I wanted to speak about, Jordan, so many people in the world, they fall in love with animals, and then all of a sudden they get sick or they're at the end of life. Do you find that the families keep those animals, or do you take them, and do you find homes readily for those animals whose caretakers are at the end of life? And I only bring this up because it's always a worry to people if they have maybe an older adult in the family and that person is getting near the end of life. Should they bring that animal to the Southampton Animal Shelter if they themselves can adopt?
So it's a wonderful question, Jean, and it's actually something that's near and dear to my heart, because one of the 3 rescues that my wife and I have here is a result of just what we're talking about. Our baby girl, Sabrina, baby girl, she's 12 years old, but her mother died of cancer, and she ended up in a shelter. And the shelter actually reached out to us because they knew that my wife is a Shih Tzu-aholic. And one of our dogs that we have, in addition to our border collie, is another Shih Tzu that we had rescued. So we swooped in and rescued her in a nanosecond. And so as far as what we do at the Southampton Animal Shelter, yes, we do take in animals along those lines. If someone is trying to plan for the end of life and they don't have anyone they can give the dog to or the cat to. As I said, we're an open admission shelter, but we're also people with big hearts. And we've even at times worked out arrangements with folks, to make sure that the adoption that they have, if God forbid something unfortunate were to happen because they had no family members, that we would take the animal back. We want folks to be comfortable and know that that's not something they're going to have to worry about. And it's actually, the other reason I'm really glad you brought this up is because not enough people actually plan for the unexpected. And, I can tell you, my wife and I, when we made out our wills, we made specific provisions about what is to happen with our animals should we predecease them. And I do, I'm loving that we're talking about this because I just think it's a topic that not enough people think about. And I encourage people to think about. You love your dog, you love your cat. What would you like to see happen with them if, God forbid, something unfortunate were to happen? And you know, making a plan in your will about who you'd like to care for that animal, making a specific bequest so that person, the new caretaker, can financially afford to care for that animal. These are things that I highly encourage.
I think that's great advice. And I think a lot of us don't think about, well, what will happen to our pets if we suddenly pass away? And it's sort of a morbid topic, but I think it's an important topic. And what about the shelter? Speaking of end of life, do we have a program where people can add the shelter to their will and, you know, sort of keep a legacy going on with Southampton Animal Shelter? I think that's so important for people. They're near the end of their lives, perhaps older people, and they've accumulated a little wealth. And I think it's important for people to think about different charity groups. And certainly for all animal lovers, it's a wonderful thing to give to an animal rescue group like Southampton Animal Shelter. If you live in the Hamptons and you really want to help out, well, think about Southampton Animal Shelter.
So, Jean, it is such a wonderful point, and I agree. You know, who wants to think about end of life? You know, not me. But it is important, and I will say, you know, one of the things I've done in my time as chairman is we've implemented a lot of changes at the shelter. We're, you know, whether it's, we had numerous new events this past year, as you know. We had the first ever golf outing, which was a huge success at the Sabonic Golf Club. You know, we had our first ever garden tour of the beautiful gardens of the private homes in Southampton, and a wonderful event we did at the end of the summer after our gala called Shampooch, where people brought their dogs and their cars and both got a car wash and a dog wash in exchange for a very nominal donation to the shelter, but which adds up. You know, so things like that. But as far as leaving, one of the reason I brought up the changes is starting in January, we'll have a new person in charge of raising money at the shelter, and we'll talk more about that come January. But in the meantime, to the extent anyone who's watching this would like to discuss how they could make leave a small bequeathment in their will to the shelter, I would be more than happy to have that conversation with you. And, you know, again, as you know, my name is Jordan Lippner, and if you just call the shelter and ask to speak to me, I will promptly return that phone call. So that would be wonderful to any of you out there. You know, we are dependent upon the generosity of our donors to exist, as well as our volunteers. So we, you know, I can't be shy about that. We welcome anything that you care to donate to us.
Yes. Now, for those watching, the Southampton Animal Shelter is a no-kill shelter located in Hampton Bays. It services the entire surrounding communities, I think 13 different communities. We take in all dogs, all animals. I don't think we would take in a deer, but anything that's adoptable and an animal that we could take in. And Jordan, what's the website again?
The website is southamptonanimalshelter.com, southamptonanimalshelter.com. And as I said, we recently redid it, and all the information you could possibly need is at your fingertips there.
Yes. Now, this summer, every summer, the Southampton Animal Shelter has a big gala, usually in July, usually in Southampton, New York. And why do you want to go to that event? Well, you learn a lot about the shelter, you support the shelter, you'll have a great time, and you'll meet a lot of very interesting and exciting people who are all very interested in the animal world. Jordan, finally, you're a very successful businessman. We haven't spoken one word about your business, but as an attorney, have you found that it's been very important in making you equipped to be chairman of the Southampton Animal Shelter Board?
Well, I think, we all bring our life experiences to wherever we find ourselves. Certainly I've been practicing law for 27 years, and my specialty has been employment law, which means I've been exposed to all kinds of wild and wacky situations. Life is stranger than fiction. And so you accumulate a lot of knowledge over the years, and it certainly helps. One of the things I've prided myself with is my ability to work with all kinds of different folks with all kinds of different personalities. And, I think that, the older we get, it's really important to focus on doing things that you're passionate about. It's one thing when you're starting out in your life, and you're feeling your way around, but there comes a point, we don't want to waste our time with doing things that really aren't important to me. And I'll say, I always, giving back to the community has always been important to me. And I used to do a lot of pro bono work as part of my law practice. And I still do pro bono work as part of my law practice. But what I came to realize over the years was animals is a passion. I'm passionate about dogs in particular, but animals in general. And it is wonderful and very fulfilling to donate my time. And as chairman, I do donate a fair amount of my time to make the shelter a success. And so, I'm speaking to all of you folks out there, who may have some time on your hands. Getting involved with the Southampton Animal Shelter is a wonderful way to fulfill areas of your life that perhaps you have time for. And, I can tell you, we have core volunteers, and the smiles on their faces, they love what they do. They love donating their time. And I would urge folks, who might be interested in getting involved, whether it's as a volunteer, whether it's as a financial donor, even as a board member. We have a few spots open, and we are always interested in hearing folks who might be interested in joining us. However, you could donate your time, your money. Always happy to have that conversation.
Excellent. And I love that the Southampton Animal Shelter is open to new board members, to new volunteers, and of course, to new donors. And one final question, Jordan. What advice would you give to a young person just starting career? You're a successful person. You're an attorney. I know you went to Fordham Law School, and now you're involved in philanthropy. And so someone's just starting out. What advice do you give them?
Appreciate that you're young. Appreciate that you'll make mistakes. Appreciate that you don't need to have all the answers. You may have friends who knew from the moment they came out of the womb that they were going to be a doctor, they were going to be this, they were going to be that, and maybe you don't know. That's okay. There's lots of time in your 20s and, to find your way. There's lots of time even in your 30s to find your way. When I was in law school, there were people on second careers. I was in law school with doctors who wanted to leave medicine in their 50s. So what I'd suggest is that go through life with your eyes wide open. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And feel comfortable taking charge of your career, because no one will take care of your career like you will. If you see something you want to go after it. Ask the people ahead of you. How can I get there? That's the advice I would give. That's advice that I followed. And, candidly, I'm very happy with how my career has turned out.
And that's wonderful advice. And I might add that for success, you need to be a hard worker and you need to be honest. Another thing I add, be a nice person, because that will help you get where you want to get. Honesty, hard work, and then be nice. Jordan, you've been a wonderful, wonderful guest. For our watchers or our viewers, We have been with Jordan Lippner. He is the president of the Southampton Animal Shelter Board. This concludes Successful Philanthropy. Our guest, Jordan Lippner. I'm Jean Shafiroff, your host. I'll see you next week.